Hello, and welcome back to DBIT's lecture series for the module ST2109, Business Opportunity. This week, our guest is Mr. Scott Anthony. Scott is a managing partner at Innosight Ventures, and he's also an author and one of the leading proponents of innovation globally, more specifically, disruptive innovation. So, without much ado, let's go and have a chat with Scott. Hi, Scott.
Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for joining us today. I'm hoping that our students who are watching this will learn quite a bit about innovation from you today. So let's get right to it. Innovation seems to be, a buzzword these days. But what is it in a real sense?
So I define innovation very specifically, 5 words: something different that creates value.
Okay.
So let me say just a couple things about the definition. Something reminds us that innovation isn't just new products or new technologies. It can be lots of different things, new marketing approaches, new ways to organize, etc. Different reminds us that we can't take the same approach when we're trying to solve a problem. We're going to do something different.
Right.
Creation of value is the most important part. Innovation is not invention, it's not creativity. Those are important, those are inputs. But until you put that into the creation of value, in my mind, you have not innovated.
Oh, okay, that's cool. That's actually a pretty decent definition of innovation, guys. But it seems to come in different flavors. There's sustaining, breakout, disruptive, social. Would it be possible for you to just kind of give us the key differences between these?
So let me take sustaining and disruptive first, because that's language from our founder, Clayton Christensen from the Harvard Business School.
Right.
It's a simple distinction. A sustaining innovation takes something that already exists and makes it better along existing performance dimensions.
Okay.
So think about an airplane that flies faster, a brighter television, the iPhone 6, whatever. A disruptive innovation competes along new performance dimensions. It's typically simpler, more convenient, more affordable. In most cases, a disruptive innovation is actually worse along the traditional dimensions that used to matter in the industry. So if you think about the original iPod, it's a great product, but the sound fidelity of MP3 technology is not as good as what you're getting in other places.
Right.
So a disruptive innovation redefines what performance is, and by doing so, transforms an existing market or creates an entirely new one.
Right. So something like, say, maybe a hard drive and a floppy drive, would that be considered as disruptive too?
So the thing that Christensen observed in the disk drive industry is the disruptive change is whenever you move to a smaller disk drive format.
Oh,
so
I
you
see.
go to these great big hard drives that get used in mainframes, and then smaller hard drives that go to mini computers, and smaller ones that go to personal computers, etc.
I see.
So in each case, the dimension that used to matter in the industry, the performance was actually worse, but it was smaller, simpler, and easier to use. So you enabled a whole new form of computing.
Got it. All right. So what are the different sources for innovation? Where does it come from?
Innovation can really come from anywhere, but I think if you look at all the research done on where breakthroughs come from, whether it's Thomas Kuhn's structure of scientific revolution or Stephen Johnson's where good ideas come from, the one common element you see is that magic happens at intersections, when different mindsets and skills collide.
Okay.
So if you're ever stuck, the number one thing I advise people to do is get to the intersections. So if you're a technology person, find a marketing person. If you're working in a tech industry, find someone who's creative in a completely different space.
Right.
Because you bring those different disciplines together, all of a sudden you see things that no individual would see.
Okay. So in your opinion, why is it important for companies, especially startups, to be innovative?
I think you have no hope of success if you're a startup if you're not innovative, because you're trying to go into a market in almost all cases where there's incumbents. There are other people who are competing.
Right, of course.
And if you don't have something that gives you a leg up compared to the other people in the market, your hopes of success are close to zero. And for large companies too, the pace of change is so ferocious today that if you're not innovating, you're not standing still, you're moving backwards.
Right.
Because you've got all these bright people in the room here and millions more around the world who are going to come and get you. So it is the competitive imperative of the 21st century,
Right.
I think.
Cool.
I'm biased, of course.
Considering the fact that every other company these days claims to be, innovative in one way or the other, is this term becoming meaningless?
It is something I really worry about because it's very easy for a CEO or other organizational leader to say, yeah, we're innovative, innovation's key and important to us.
Right.
And the thing you always watch for is, are the actions the company is taking, are they consistent with the things they're proclaiming?
Right.
Are they actually going and launching new products and services? Are they innovating their business model? Are they really doing things differently? Because after all, strategy is not what you say, strategy is what you actually do.
Yeah, that's right. So in order for a company to be innovative, does it have to develop innovative technology all the time, or are there any other ways to be innovative as well?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they assume that innovation lives in labs. It's only done by white lab coat wearing scientists. So if you don't have the right engineer or the right scientist coming up with a new molecule or whatever, you're not innovative. But one of the most powerful ways to innovate is by innovating your business model, the way you're creating, capturing, and delivering value. So you have companies that create entirely new industries without any technology at all. One of the local examples I like to talk about is QB House. You can probably tell from looking at me that I get my hair cut there.
Well, me too.
No judgment. And if you look at what QB House has done, it's a very innovative business. But it's not any technology at all. It's a standardized process that delivers consistent, reliable haircuts for $12.
Right.
So the technology isn't what makes it magic. It's the way in which they organize, the strategic choices they make, and
The
so
whole
on.
process.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct. And you know with confidence that you can get in and out in about 8 minutes if you've got hair like mine, and your haircut always looks exactly the same.
Yeah,
it's
mine
not for
does.
everybody, but for
Mine
people like
does.
me and you, it works just great.
So how does someone start being innovative? Is this something that can be managed and developed over time, or is it something that's inbuilt within an individual?
The research is very clear that innovation is a skill. Of course, anyone who has some God-given talent is going to outperform someone who doesn't. But with enough practice, anybody can be a proficient innovator. The very first thing that I suggest people do if they want to begin to get good at innovation is to invest the time to understand the market they're interested in.
Okay.
Go out and observe, spend time with customers with eyes wide open to try to look for problems worth solving. Good innovators really understand the fabric of markets, and that comes from spending a ton of time in the marketplace.
So basically, empathizing with your customers and
Exactly.
Doing your market research and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Peter Drucker once said, the purpose of a business is to create a customer. And the only way you're going to create a customer is if you solve a problem for them. In our language, you help them get a job done.
Right.
So the thing you always want to be looking for is, what is the problem not solved today? What is the job that's worth addressing? Because that's the thing that gives you the inspiration to begin to innovate.
Right. So how important is it for an entrepreneur to make sure that innovation within their organizations is linked directly to business strategy and leadership, and why?
That's a great question. One of the things that I always worry about when you get into a company and they've got an innovation person or team off to the side of the organization, innovation shouldn't be apart from strategy. It should be a part of strategy.
Okay.
Is innovation doing something different that creates value is really how you're creating competitive advantage. So leaders need to think about the strategic choices they're making to drive innovation.
Right.
And if it does not work altogether, you're going to have a lot of lip service, but you're not going to make any real progress.
So speaking of Steve Jobs, he once said that people don't know what they want until you show it to them, right? Yet there is another school of thought that states that products should be designed based on what the customer wants and needs. As such, what role should the customers play in innovation strategy?
So I would say two things. Number one, I would say I'm a believer in spending as much time as you humanly can with customers before you come up with any product at all. I think the thing that Jobs and his team had was they were the customer. So they understood at a deep level what are things that we would find cool.
Right.
That's not true in all cases. So if you can spend enough time with the customer that you have that empathetic connection with them, I think it can help you anticipate what they'll react to. Then the second thing is, as you begin to come up with early stage prototypes, etc., yes, customers can't tell you what they want until they see it, but they certainly can react to something
Right.
when you show it to them.
Right.
And I think too many companies like to keep things hidden behind the curtain until it's time for the great big reveal. And then the customer looks and says, that's it? So you really want to go through a co-creation journey with them, where you test it early and test it often. Is every idea is partially right and partially wrong.
Right.
And you want to figure out how you're wrong as early as you can when you've got more time to change.
So it's kind of like the design thinking principle in that sense.
Absolutely.
Right.
No, I think the basic ideas of design thinking, the notion that you have the empathetic connection with the customer, you think abductively to come up with ideas, and then rapid prototyping, I think are fantastic principles for innovation.
Okay. So you, along with Professor Clayton Christensen, have been one of the main proponents of disruptive innovation. Even your consulting and investment company, Innosight, looks to work with businesses which are disruptive in nature, right? So what advantages do companies have when they follow the path of disruptive innovation over others who don't?
So two big advantages. Number one, disruptive innovation has been proven time and time again to produce above average returns. So if you're creating a company like Salesforce.com or Netflix or Facebook or whatever, if you follow the principles of disruptive success, you have a greater chance of doing fantastic things. The other advantage you get is big increases in productivity. Innovation isn't random. It doesn't have to be random. There are principles and patterns that can increase the odds of success, decrease the cost of failure, and allow you to do things much faster. So those that follow a more systematic approach, they get real productivity advantages. Just one very simple example. We started working with Procter & Gamble in the early part of the last decade. At the time, 15% of their innovation efforts were succeeding, and those that did succeed were small. By the end of the work we did, and a lot of other things they were working on, the success rate tripled, the size of a project doubled. So they got 6 times the return of their investment in innovation, which is a huge return if you're a leader of a company spending more than $2 billion a year on innovation.
So you are kind of based here in Singapore, with Innosight, and you work with a lot of startups here. So how do Singaporean startups compare to startups, say, in the Valley, especially when it comes to innovation?
So I'd make a couple observations. I think the Singaporean entrepreneurial ecosystem has come a long way, even in the 4 years I've been here. I remember my first trip to Singapore, 2003, so 11 years ago now. The notion of having a startup in Singapore, people said, I guess we had one of those once, but it's just not what you think about in Singapore. Today, it is a much more vibrant ecosystem, which I think is great. One big difference that you see is there's much more stigma around failure in Singapore. In the Valley, it's expected that an entrepreneur will have failed a couple or 3 times before they get it right. But in Singapore, there's still a big tendency to try to make it perfect. So I think that's one big difference. I think the second difference is you have fewer people who are so-called serial entrepreneurs. Not a surprise given where the ecosystem is. If you go to the Valley, you're seeing people who are on their 3rd or 4th startup. And in Singapore, it's many times on their 1st startup. I think the third thing that I would observe at least is just the depth of talent that we have here. It's forming, and I'm hoping that a lot of your students go out and do some great entrepreneurial things.
Yeah, we hope so too.
Because we really need more great people out there. We need engineers, we need product people, we need marketing people. We need people with that energy that can go and create these new businesses that we so dearly need.
So which are some of the most innovative startups that you've come across here in Singapore, and what makes them really stand out?
One of my favorite companies that we've invested in is a company called Wildfire. It's a very interesting company. It was a couple INSEAD graduates, who formed the company. Neither one of them was Singaporean. There was an American guy and a German guy who founded the company. They got some good Singaporeans on their team after that. But they've gone and brought a word-of-mouth marketing offering to China and other parts of Southeast Asia. And the thing that I love about it is when they started the company, they did what so many people do. Say, here was a business that succeeded in the US called Buzz Agent that we're going to replicate in Asia. So we're going to get a lot of human beings and essentially pay them small amounts of money to try to influence word-of-mouth marketing and so on. But it turned out that they needed to do a lot of changes to have something that would work in the local market. Today they've gone from a company doing word-of-mouth marketing through human beings to essentially a software as a service company where they can do social scanning and media monitoring.
Analytics and...
Correct.
Right.
And also still have ways that they can influence the conversation, but do it through robust software that matches human beings with microblogs and so on.
Okay.
So the thing I love about the Wildfire team is they're just restless. They keep looking for what it's going to take to really succeed. It wasn't, we have this idea, we're going to go and execute it even though the market's telling us something else. It's we're going to start here, and then go here, and then go here, and then go here. And it looks like they've now found the winning model, then you go and scale it. But that notion of testing, learning, and adjusting has really been evidenced by what they've been doing.
Okay.
It's a great team.
Cool. So what are the main barriers to innovation, and how can businesses overcome them?
I think it depends a lot on the business itself, but I think honestly the biggest barrier that people have is they put too much mystery around it, and they make it a lot harder than it needs to be. And because of that, they don't really do anything about it. They think, well, I'm not Steve Jobs, I'm not Richard Branson, I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, I'm not Tony Fernandez, whatever. I can't be that kind of person. But really, everybody can. Then as you get inside many companies, I think the biggest barrier they have is they just don't adequately resource it. People get really deluded by 3M and Google, who both companies at one point in their history said, we'll give engineers 15% of time and great businesses will come. That really doesn't work in most places. What you really need to do is have somebody who wakes up every morning and goes to sleep every night thinking about nothing but innovation.
Right.
And when you ask people in their spare time to come up with world-changing ideas, in most places that doesn't work. So you got to get the right resources behind it.
So what are some of the newest trends in innovation that you've come across? I mean, anything new in the innovation world?
I think the thing that you observe as being new is just the massive democratization of financing for innovation.
Okay.
Now, it used to be that there was a small group of venture capitalists that had all the money. That was the only thing you could do.
Right.
The cost of starting a business has gone way down. When we see things in our venture capital arm, these are fully functioning businesses.
Right.
They've got websites, customers, revenues, and their source of financing is a credit card. That's all it takes to really get started today.
Right.
And because of that, you have all these new forms, whether it's incubators, whether it's things like Kickstarter, where you can go and put your idea up and get people to prepay for it, Indiegogo, and a bunch of other examples. I think that notion that you can have many, many, many more ways to get a business started really is a big and lasting change.
Okay. Well, the last question. Most of the students who are watching this today, when I speak to them in class, they always tell me that they can never be entrepreneurs, or they don't want to be entrepreneurs because they don't have it in them, to be entrepreneurial. They don't want to take risks, or one of the other answers that I get is we don't have money. So, any final words of advice for the students who are watching this as to how can they overcome this?
Just go and do it. So the analogy that I like to give is I talk about my now 8-year-old son, Charlie, and the way he went and learned to ride a bike. So a couple years ago, he announced that he wanted to learn to ride a bike. We didn't watch YouTube videos. We didn't discuss the theory of bike riding. There was no PowerPoint presentations involved. He got on a bike and he started to pedal. And he fell down. And then he got back up and he started to pedal. Today, he is a proficient bike rider. Just like anybody can be a proficient bike rider with practice, just like anybody can be a proficient innovator with practice. It is a discipline. I know it sounds a little scary, but if you read the right literature and you take the right steps, your chances of success go way, way up. And really, anybody has the capabilities to do it. And with the pace that our world is changing today, innovation is changing everything. The way that we work, live, play, communicate, raise our families. So you have got to understand it. And there's no better way to understand it than going out and trying. And the lack of money, boy, I just don't accept that at all. In this day and age, you can launch a new business for nothing. So a lack of money is not an excuse.
Right. Well, thank you, Scott, so much for
Thank you
your
very
time.
much.
I really appreciate it. So that was Scott Anthony from Innosight Ventures, and he was talking to us about innovation. And I will see you guys next week again, where we will discuss a new concept. Until then, take care.